Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming out tonight. I hope it's a lot warmer in here than it was outside there. I've put the air conditioning on, so I just hope the temperature's right for you as well. Just noticing the boys coming in after being away for a while, you sort of miss things. And just seeing the way the boys have come in tonight and the way they're wearing their uniform is a real credit to them, but more so a real credit to you as well. And I thank you for taking the time and the pride to make sure your sons look as good as they do. So, gentlemen, congratulations on that to start with. When you go away for a term and you come back, it's amazing how the landscape can change at times. The fact that I came back, no Mr Brennan, no Miss Jeffcoat, we've got a new year coordinator in year 10 and things just change. With Mr Brennan going away, I had a question up tonight in the Finance Advisory Council. Well, he's obviously gone and he won't be back, but I can assure you we've spoken about this at length. He will be back next year as well. With the foundation, we have Miss Stott running that and she's looking after the sports dinner, and we have to get that over the line this year, and then we'll look at where we go after that as well. With Mr Nixon not being around, I'm very appreciative for Mr Cerrone stepping up and taking on the role of looking after year 10. As you've heard, there's a lot of work that happens, especially at the back end of year 10 with the work experience and then all those camps that take place as well. So I'm very appreciative of him taking on that role. When I came back last week, I went and had a look at the boys' report data just to go through it. The letters about the boys who have done well, they would have gone out during the holidays, but I didn't send out any letters about improvements or boys I need to talk to. And I did that for a reason, thinking about tonight. The fact that you come along tonight for Year 10 subject selection evening for senior school, it's a very important night, and it's very important that we choose the right pattern of study. Part of that will be, I've looked at boys who've improved and I will send out letters to them this week, but also the boys who haven't improved and have actually gone backwards. I'm actually going to see all those boys individually over the next week and a half. And it's a conversation I need to have with them, because when you're looking at subject selection, you'll look at subjects, and if the boy has not gone well in it, let's take science for argument's sake, and he's only got 20, there's no point in talking about physics or chemistry for him. So we need to have those conversations. We've got a boy in year 11 at the moment. He didn't pass any subjects in the last semester. And when I've gone and had a look at the subjects he's chosen, they were the wrong subjects. And one of the things we're going to do this year, we're going to have a compulsory interview with every parent and their son to go over the pattern of study to make sure they are choosing the correct subjects where they can be most successful in. We don't want to set boys up for failure. So that interview becomes very important. The people who you'll be seeing are on the stage here and also subject coordinators down the back, but that interview will become very important to how your son is going to perform when he moves into year 11 and 12. One of the things I've also noticed this year, we've lost a lot of boys since the start of the year, and I'd say most probably over 30. And when I looked at the major reason for it, we would have lost, I'd say, about 22 up to today of all boys who have taken on apprenticeships. Now, they're usually boys out of year 11, because I think we started year 11 with about 170 and we're down to 140 at the moment. And those boys have left to go and take up apprenticeships. And that's a very good thing for those boys as well. They're usually hands-on types, so the best thing for them is to go to work. But if we can also encourage them to stay to the end of the HSC, they get a HSC and they also have done work experience, they've done vet subjects, and they're well set up to go into trades and apprenticeships after that. I would say when you look at going into year 11, the boys mature over the 6 weeks holiday, and they usually arrive with a different attitude towards study and senior school. And I suppose if I use an example of one boy who came in year 10 for us from a country town, and he didn't really buy into it, he didn't buy into the academic side of life, but we've worked with him and lived with him, and we've got him into year 12 now, and he is in such a good place that they gave him the right pattern of study. He's adapted to that. He's been going to TAFE and he's been doing very well at TAFE. He's been playing his sport and he's been doing very well at that. And his biggest problem is, from his point of view, is he may not be available for graduation day, and there's a reason for that. But the graduation day, as many of you would know, is so important to the boys because it's about them coming together and celebrating the fact that they've been with that group for the 6 years. And it's a very important day for you. The fact that you've put your sons through school and you've lived with them, you've breathed with them and cared for them for those 13 years. So it becomes a very important day for you. The number of parents whose boys leave a bit earlier and they tell me they are disappointed, not so much that they've got a job to go to and that's great, but they really would have liked them to have stayed on to the end of Year 12 to be there for that graduation day because it meant so much to them as well as to their sons. So tonight I would say to you, you're going to have KLA coordinators around who you can talk to. There'll be a lot of information thrown at you and you obviously don't make decisions tonight, but that interview that you arrange with whoever the staff member is a very important interview and you need to talk through everything and especially in connection with the boys' performance over the last 12 months. Boys will tell me, yes, I'm going to improve tomorrow. And that's a lovely thought and it's very positive. But from my point of view, the data is what I look at and that is where I make my decisions from. And as many of you would know, when I've looked at some of the data of boys who haven't performed well, and once I take that forward and we put plans into place, they've turned out to be quite successful. Mr. Spencer will talk about one of those boys tonight who was not travelling well in boarding. We sat him down, we looked at all his marks and we had a look at the pattern of study and then we also put plans into place in the boarding house to see if we could improve and he did improve out of sight. So tonight is a very significant night for you and gentlemen, please take on board everything that you hear up here tonight and also at the end of the evening there will be people down the back who you can go and talk to about subjects. Take that all very seriously because you are a wonderful group of young men. We want you to be very successful and if possible, we want you all here on graduation day in Year 12. Thank
you. Oops. Good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Catherine Keegan and I'm the Director of Studies at the college. And my primary responsibility at the moment is to work with your sons to prepare them for their senior journey, their Stage 6 journey. The first thing that I'd like to mention is that there is a lot of information that will hit your email, etc. over the next month or so. And if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, it's probably not just you. It is a very difficult process in some respects, and that's why we encourage you to stay very much in contact with us here at the college, particularly in contact with a head of a department if it's a particular subject that you have concerns about, or if it's an overall picture thing, if you contact me or anything careers related, contact Mrs. Dean. But it's really important, no question is silly. There's no such thing as a silly question. If you have a question, please make sure that you feel free to ask. Mr. Miller already mentioned that there are a number of very good reasons to come back to Year 11. As well as developing your maturity, it's also a chance to develop some skills. And depending on your interests, you can not only get your HSC, you could also get a couple of certificates from TAFE that you could then use in the future as well. So it can be a very, very productive 2 years for most of our boys. Of course, if you are interested in university study, these 2 years are very important as preparation for entry into university. And even if you're looking at a TAFE pathway or work, there's also the chance to prepare very much for that. And we're very fortunate to have Mrs. Dean, who does a lot of work, she and I do a lot of work together for those boys. I'm sure you're aware that recently the New South Wales government raised the leaving age to 17, so that has changed the landscape for many of our students. So our students must be either at school or at TAFE in some other form of study or in a minimum of 25 hours work per week until they turn 17. Right, so that's a law in New South Wales. Just in terms of the basics of getting into senior study, when we are looking at choosing patterns of study, you need to be looking at 12 or 13 units. So you must do a minimum of 12 or 13 units in Year 11. Going on to Year 12, you must have a minimum of 10. Most of our boys will have 13 because the study of religion is compulsory, and most of our boys will have 11 for that same reason in Year 12. You also have to be careful when you're putting those patterns of study together. If you're interested in courses that are perhaps not going to contribute to an ATAR, that's not a problem at all, but you've got to make sure that you have what's called 6 units of board-developed courses. And one of our processes is obviously very much to check that you've done that. So in your planning, you must make sure that you've got 6 units of board-developed courses to take into Year 12. If you're really rusty and you haven't had a chance to look at the handbook yet, when I'm speaking of a course, most courses that we have are 2 unit in value, with the exception of religion generally and a couple of other extension courses. So the 1 unit courses we do have on offer for next year will be Studies of Religion 1, Catholic Studies, which is a non-ATAR course, and both English and Maths Extension 1. Both of those build on the advanced courses, but that's an extra unit. So you can take up to 3 units of English and 3 units of Maths in Year 11. Most of the courses that we offer for Year 11 are board-developed courses. So for those of you who have had a chance to look at the handbook, you'll see that most of them are board-developed. As I said, those exceptions are Catholic Studies, any of our TAFE courses, which Mrs. Dean will speak about later, Sports, Lifestyle and Recreation, Photography, Standard Maths 1, which is a Year 12 course, and Mrs. Giles will speak about that, and a new course that we are hoping to offer next year, which is Work Studies. For your board-endorsed courses, so your regular English, Maths, History, Science courses, etc., they all count towards your HSC. With our board-endorsed courses, they also count towards your HSC, so those courses I listed previously, but they don't have a HSC exam, right? So you don't have to sit a HSC exam in those subjects, but they're also not counted towards an ATAR. If you are looking at university entrance, you also need to keep your eye on that when you're planning your pattern of study. For those of you who are really rusty, the ATAR, the Australian Tertiary Admissions Rank, actually replaced the UAI, and if you're a little bit older than that, you might remember the TER. So there's been a few versions of it, but we're currently up to the ATAR. So if you are interested in university entrance, you need to have at least 10 units of board-developed courses for Year 12, 2 of which must be English. Now, the Board of Studies, or NESA, as they are now called, are currently looking at English studies, and we're still awaiting for a decision about whether or not English studies will be considered for the ATAR. So I'll keep you informed when that comes in. So our ATAR courses then do have formal HSC exams. Most of them are 3 hours in length. Some of them are a little shorter. Standard Maths is usually 2.5, and at this stage our English exams have been 2 2-hour exams. Ms. Gardner will speak about that. And those courses are generally more rigorous in terms of their level of difficulty. If you are doing an ATAR, but you are still interested in our vocational courses, you can include one of those in the calculation of your ATAR, provided you actually sit for the HSC exam. So for the vocational courses, HSC exams are optional, but if you want to use it in your ATAR, you must sit for it. One of the questions that we are often asked is, should my son study mathematics? Obviously, that's a very personal question. Unfortunately, the new syllabus has tended to make the courses a little more difficult than they have been previously. So it's not essential. We don't make the boys study mathematics at St Greg's. A lot of schools do, but we've chosen not to do that. If you don't enjoy it and you're really struggling, the situation must or may get worse, so you need to take that into consideration. If you're worried about the requirements for an apprenticeship or a job, it's best to check with Mrs. Dean, and she and I will work together to work out for you what level of mathematics you will require. Most of the time it's Year 10. Mrs. Giles will speak to you a little bit later about the difference between standard mathematics and mathematics. Those parents who have had sons or daughters through the HSC before, that name has changed. So there'll be a new course next year. Standard mathematics will replace general mathematics. So Mrs. Giles will speak to you a little later about that. You do need to be aware, however, that the University of Sydney has made a change from their 2019 entry. And if you are interested in some of the courses at the University of Sydney, you must have studied mathematics. So Mrs. Dean, I know, has published a list of those courses, and certainly the list is there. It's probably a little difficult to read, but I'll make sure I get that information out to you in an email as well. So if you're looking at the University of Sydney, you need to check whether or not you require mathematics as opposed to standard mathematics. So what subjects should you choose? Okay, the first thing is that you should look at your abilities. How have you gone over the last 2 years in particular? What areas interest you? What do you really, really, really enjoy doing? Because that's where you're going to do well. You may need to take career goals into account as well. The maths example is a good one just there. And perhaps if you want to become a scientist, then choosing science subjects would be really good. So career goals are important. But advice from your teachers is also really invaluable. Some of the things to avoid are myths about scaling. You can't just choose a higher level of a subject and be scaled to your advantage. It doesn't work that way. It may have worked that way 30 years ago, but it doesn't work that way anymore. And NESA are working very closely to make sure that that doesn't happen now by putting courses on the same kind of standard. So you're not going to get an advantage by being in a higher level. You get an advantage by being in the best level that suits you and working the hardest that you can. It's important not to choose courses that are too difficult for you because you just lose confidence and it can upset the rest of your pattern of study. Don't make choices with your friends, right? It's great to still have friends outside of the classroom, but you might choose a subject such as business studies, and we might have 3 business studies classes. So if you only choose business studies because your mate's doing it, you might be in one class and he might be in another. So be your own man and make your own choices. It's also really important not to choose courses where you would find the assessment difficult. So if you are not very organised or self-motivated, it's probably not a good idea to do a course such as visual arts or timber where you've got a major project, right? You need to be self-motivated and you need to be able to work through the project. Similarly, if you don't like to stand up in front of people and perform, choosing music would be a silly option. Okay, so you need to be aware of those, and the staff are here tonight, so if you have any concerns about those, you can speak to them. I mentioned already that a maximum of 2 VET courses. Also a maximum, we try to limit the number of courses requiring major projects because they're all due at the same time. Just looking ahead, it's important that you know that when you're in Year 12, half of your HSC mark comes from your school-based assessment, right? Half comes from the exam and half from the assessment. If you are talented as an artist or a woodworker, there can be a considerable advantage in choosing those subjects, or music as well, because a lot of the practical work is done prior to the HSC, so it does take some pressure off. I'll talk a little more about the HSC requirements once we get into Year 12, but I'm sure that one of the things that Mr. Miller will agree with me is that regular attendance in Year 11 and 12 is very important. If you are regularly absent, that puts a lot of pressure on you and makes it difficult for you to get up some continuity. Your best effort is needed in all tasks, not just the ones that count towards your assessment. You need to work towards all of your tasks. They're all designed to improve your skills in prelim in preparation for the HSC. And it is a requirement of NESA that you attempt all of the tasks. So what have we done so far? Towards the end of Term 2, each of the KLA coordinators presented to the boys. The gentlemen were fantastic. They were really well behaved and asked some intelligent questions. Both Miss Gardner, who is our English coordinator, Mrs. Giles, who's our maths coordinator, have spoken to the classes separately as well. We've got the information evening tonight, and then the interviews, which will take place in weeks 3 and 4, are mandatory. They will be predominantly with Mrs. Dean and myself, but also with some support from other members of the college leadership team. I've had a number of people ask questions. You only need to book one 15-minute interview. Okay, so just the one interview, that's enough. It's important that you know as well that the forms are due on the 10th of August. Sorry, I've skipped one. The 10th of August, so they will be handed in to Mr. Cerrone. And any forms that are not handed in on time will be marked late. So for example, if there was a class that was already full and your form comes in late, then you'll drop off that preference list. So it's important to get it in on time. So what is our process? Listen, 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 and talk, talk, talk. Information is power in this process. You really need to get as much information as you can. You need to seek advice from your subject teacher and the head of each of the departments. There are a number of our more difficult subjects which will require you to get the signature of the KLA coordinator. Subjects such as Advanced English, Studies of Religion 1 and 2, Advanced Maths, Physics, Chemistry, Software and Economics, PDHPE. So you'll need to see the coordinator to be signed off with each of those. And as I mentioned, the interviews. You are most welcome as parents to contact myself or Mrs. Dean by phone or email, or as I said, we'll see you in person as well in weeks 3 or 4. But if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Sometimes parents ask me if I can give them an idea of the sort of things that, you know, their son could put together as a pattern of study. So there are all sorts of ways of doing it. At the college, we don't form our lines first. We get our expressions of interest from the boys and then form our lines around them so that we're really confident that we're catering for the most number of boys that we can. So an example of a pattern of study for a boy who might be interested in creative arts might be Studies of Religion 2, Advanced English and Extension English, Mathematics, Music 1, Visual Arts and Modern History. That would give him 13 units for Year 11. Year 11. Perhaps you're not sure whether or not uni is something that you're interested in, but you'd like to have a broad base. So perhaps Catholic Studies, Standard English, Standard Maths, Biology, Business Studies, IPT, PDHPE. A lot of variety in that pattern of study. Perhaps you're already aware that you're not interested in preparing for university entrance and you'd like to prepare for industry. So perhaps Catholic Studies, English Studies, Standard Maths 1 when it comes up in Year 12, Construction, Industrial Technology, and we have a number of those options, Metals and Engineering, which is also a VET course, and IPT. Finally, you might be undertaking or wishing to undertake a very rigorous pattern of study, and you might look at Studies of Religion 1, English Advanced, Mathematics and the Extension in Mathematics, Chemistry, Economics, Software Design. So a very heavy pattern of study, but certainly one that would prepare you for a cross-section of courses at university. Okay? I'm actually going to now hand over to our Director of Mission, Mrs. Clark, who's going to speak to you very briefly about the courses that we have to offer in religion. Could I just thank you again for coming tonight, encourage you to contact Mrs. Dean and I for whatever you need, and please, as I said, feel comfortable in asking any question that you have, because no question is too silly. Thank you again.
Hi, good evening everyone. I will be very quick. Just before I talk about religious education as a subject, I'd just like to briefly speak to you about leadership and community service, which are also really important in our senior years. So as we're developing the boys academically, we're also hoping that they take on the role of leadership as senior students. At the end of their prelim year, they'll all be given a badge to wear as senior leaders of the college, and we take that very seriously and what it means. In order to be leaders, we really think that community service is an important part of the criteria. So at the beginning of this year, I launched with your sons our community service project, and they have responded really well. I've had so many of the young men here come already to Claymore Homework Club, down to Reby Juvenile Justice Centre with me, for the Salvation Army Collection Day, the Anzac March. They've been really good. But just a reminder to those boys that maybe haven't completed it, that if you want to put your hand up to be an elected leader next year, you must have completed that community service. I know too that a lot of boys already do a lot with their local communities, things like setting up soccer fields, football fields, all that sort of thing. All of that counts. So the boys are aware of that. It's just up to them to get the paperwork filled out so that that criteria is filled. Later this year, I will ask the boys to nominate themselves to be Big Brothers, which is our leadership program for Year 11. The staff decide on who form that team from the student nominations. At this time next year, they then nominate themselves to be elected leaders, and it's the boys that decide who those elected leaders are. All right, so they actually vote in those elected leaders. So just an important thing to keep in mind as you're becoming senior students. With my RE hat on then, the boys don't have a lot of decisions to make really regarding religious education. It's compulsory, so if they are an ATAR student, I strongly recommend that they do the Studies of Religion course. If they are interested in history and they are very good English students, I recommend that they do the 2-unit course. It's not like what they've done before. They'll study Buddhism and Islam as well as Christianity, and it will be a really good contributor to their ATAR. The reason that I suggest that they do 2-unit is because if they start 1 unit, decide they love it and want to go to 2-unit, they can't. If they start doing 2-unit and they decide it's not really the subject for them or it's too difficult, they can move to 1 unit. All right, so it's a good thing, particularly for those boys who are strong English students or strong history students, to consider that. If you're a non-ATAR student, then I would suggest that Catholic Studies is probably the course for you, but you are most welcome to give Studies of Religion a go, and if you're not happy there or you're finding it too difficult, to move to Catholic Studies. All right? But I'm very happy to answer questions on any of those things later in the evening. Thanks.
I'd like to introduce you now to Mrs. Michelle Gardner, who's our English coordinator.
Thanks, Mr. Cerrone. Good evening, everyone. I just want to start by clarifying something that Mrs. Keegan said, just in case, gentlemen, you think that you've missed something. I haven't been to speak to each English class because I knew that I would be seeing you here tonight, and I didn't want you to have to sit through the same presentation twice. So this is the first time I'm actually speaking to you, and I'll be talking about the fact that English is the most important subject. And I'm not just saying that because it's my subject and I love it. It really is the most important subject, and that's because it is the only subject that is mandatory across the state. So Mrs. Clark said that religion or Catholic studies or studies of religion is compulsory here, but it's not compulsory at every single school across the state, whereas English is. You must do English in years 11 and 12. Miss, do you have the clicker? Can I use it? So, English is a very unique subject. It's the only mandatory subject, as I've already said. So you must study it for the whole of Stage 6. And that means that you don't have a choice about doing English, but you have a choice within English. So there are a number of different strands that you can study, choose to study. For next year, there have been some significant changes to our syllabus. You may have seen there's been some coverage in the media, some controversy about what is happening to English and what that will mean for students. So this group are the first group to experience the new syllabus, and still there are being changes made, so nothing is definite just yet. But as far as I know at this point, this is the information that I can give you. And I'm going to start with the strand of English that has undergone the most significant number of changes, and that's English Studies. So Mrs. Keegan already mentioned that English Studies can now be counted towards an ATAR. Previously it was a non-ATAR subject, but again, this hasn't been completely finalised. So I'm guessing that if it's going to be a HSC subject and an ATAR subject, there'll be some form of exam. But as yet, we haven't seen what that exam will look like, and that's the same for all of the English courses. We don't know what those exams will be just yet. So we have a syllabus, we have sample programs, we know how to assess, but we don't know what the end point is just yet. So previously, for English Studies, that was the kind of subject that you would choose if you were someone who was not planning to go to university and that you were looking at industry or workplace as the way that you would leave Year 12. So as a result of that, you would study workplace-based texts and community-based texts. So up on the screen, this is an idea now of what English Studies looks like. I won't read the entire thing to you, but if you are someone who's thinking about English Studies, these are the things that you will do as part of that course. Can I just draw everyone's attention to the bottom of that slide, because it indicates that now there's going to be a common unit, common to the studies course, the standard course and the advanced course. So that's the most important change to all of our courses. There's now a common module across those 3 courses. For English Standard, that is most like what you do in English at the moment. So to give you an idea, you'd be looking at prose fiction texts and drama and poetry, and it's very much like what you do in English at the moment. Currently, for Standard English, there are 2 2-hour HSC exams, but that may well change. We don't know quite what's in store yet. Most students across the state study Standard English, and it's still quite a rigorous course. It's a literature-based course. It's an essay-based course. And as you can see down the bottom there, the common module is there, and it means that all students across the state will be studying that same module when they study English. Moving on to Advanced English. This is a highly rigorous course, and it is very demanding in terms of what students need to be able to do already. So there is a basic kind of entry-level requirement, and that means that if you're thinking of doing Advanced English, you need to be quite good at English already. So if you were contemplating Advanced English, you would need to be someone who has a proven track record in English. And that means that you would have received A's or B grades in English across year 7 to 10, that you would have been in the A or the B class across those years, and that when we take a look at your cumulative mark at the end of the year, that mark would be above 70. As Mrs. Keegan has already mentioned, if you're planning to do advanced English, you need to actually see me and I have to sign your form to say that I agree that you will be capable of doing advanced English. And so you need my signature and then also Mrs. Keegan's signature. If you really love English, there are some of you out there I know, you can choose to do Extension 1, so that's an additional unit, and then Extension 2, so that if you were doing all of those courses, you'd be studying 4 units of English. We're really looking at someone who has a passion for English in choosing these subjects, and you're very much working like a first-year university student if you do these particular subjects. So you need to be quite self-disciplined, very motivated, you need to be prepared to research, and you need to be prepared to do a lot of reading and a lot of writing. So if you don't like those kind of things, don't choose this course. Again, you would need to be signed off on your intention to undertake Extension 1, and you cannot do Extension 1 without doing Advanced English, so you would be needing my signature for that anyway. So there is a lot to think about in terms of which English strand you will choose. So how do you best make that decision? Firstly, you know yourself, you know what your skills, your strengths are as an English student, so think about that. Then you speak with your parents. You might have older brothers or sisters who have done particular courses within English and they might be able to give you some guidance. And then you can also talk to friends from other schools who have already undertaken Stage 6 English and they can help you. Then you can talk to your English teacher. They would know a lot about which particular course you should take. Or you can come and see me. The other people that you can speak to, Mrs. Dean and Mrs. Keegan as well, they can advise you about what to undertake. So that's all from me. I'll be down the back this evening if you have any questions. Thanks, everyone.
Of all the non-compulsory courses at schools right across the state, I would probably suspect that maths is the one with the highest number of students involved. So I'd like to now introduce you to Mrs. Melissa Giles, who is our maths coordinator.
Hi everyone. I did go into every single maths class at the end of last term to discuss the mathematic choices for Year 11, and it really depends on the level of maths that your child has been doing this year in Year 10. Oh, my PowerPoint's not there. Okay. So I did have a PowerPoint. Is it there? Okay. There's obviously the change in the mathematics syllabus for next year. It was going to be both the advanced course and the standard course. Now the general maths course has been classed as mathematics standard because they want to match it up a little bit with English. English have the standard and the advanced, and a lot of confusion has been happening with mathematics in terms of the general course and then the mathematics course, and a lot of students get confused about whether mathematics is the 2 units, etc. So now they've actually aligned it with English, and they will have mathematics advanced and mathematics standard. Obviously, we still offer the Extension 1 in Year 11, and then obviously in Year 12 Extension 2. The students, the difference now with, just like English, the standard course will now have components that are the same in the advanced course. So there will be specific parts of standard that will be also in the advanced, so that they'll have a comparison. So a lot of times Mrs. Keegan talked about with scaling, they would actually, students who are more capable in maths would drop down to general to get a better ATAR. They're going to try and avoid that now, so they will have those questions both in the standard paper and the advanced paper to make it a little bit more difficult. And so if you're thinking about picking standard, everybody does the same course in year 11. In year 12, it does branch off into the two different courses, but they have made it more difficult now. So if you are a student who struggles with maths, unfortunately, they're making the course that little bit more difficult, so you're going to have to work that little bit harder. When I came to the classes, I talked about the level of maths that is equivalent to what you're doing now. So if your son is doing Pathway 3 at the moment, that is in line with Mathematics Advanced and Extension 1. If your child is doing Pathway 2 at the moment and doing extremely well at Pathway 2, they can still do Mathematics Advanced or Mathematics Standard, okay? But essentially those students doing Pathway 2 are not capable of choosing Mathematics Extension unless they have been exposed to some of those Pathway 3 content, which our two top classes in Year 10 have been exposed to. Our Pathway 1 students, you can do Mathematics Standard, but again, when I came in and spoke to you and you know, you were quite open to listening to the difficulties when I also talked about the grades, the ROSA grades, and how you're compared to everybody. Maths is going to be difficult for you if you choose standard, okay? But again, you are capable of choosing Mathematics Standard if you did Pathway 1. You can even choose Mathematics Standard if you did Pathway 3. If you're going to be more of a journalist, an English person, and you don't need to have Mathematics Advanced, you can do Mathematics Standard as well. Okay, so, but I did come and have a discussion with each class, so they should be aware. I'll be at the back of the room if parents want to come up and get some more clarification on the level of maths that your child should be selecting. Because I've got a printout of all the class lists so that I know exactly where your child is in terms of Pathway 1, 2 and 3. So thank you very much.
Mrs. Sue Dean is our careers advisor here at St Greg's, and part of her responsibilities is to look after what we might call the industry-based courses in Year 11 and Year 12, and I'd like to introduce her to you right now.
Thank you. I'll just give you something, a little bit of a hint. I'm on a timetable, and you can tell that by Mr. Miller's face. Okay? So, good evening. Mr. Brennan's down there smiling. I am the careers advisor at the college, and I think it's really important, and I'm very passionate about it, because you have to have the right information. So, gentlemen, very quickly, if you don't know the 5 ways to be an accountant, you need to come and see me, okay? And bring your parents along, I'm happy to tell them too. It just means, I had someone come into my room yesterday and went, never been here before. I said, well, you should have been. I also had 3 boys in the last couple of days come in, and they each went through the work experience things, each found a job by the end of it. So it's not a frightening room, it's a room where you can get information and we can have a talk. But the next few minutes that I have to talk to you are more about the other side, the vocational side of the college. So I just want to quickly go through these things. I will say yesterday I went to a leadership meeting with some boys from Year 11, and it's called Max Potential, and the whole idea is to give them ownership of themselves. And they had a great theme, so I thought I would tell you that because it'll only take a sec. Their theme is, gentlemen, no blame, no excuses, I am responsible for my choices and thus my results. If you have that as your mantra for the next 2 years while you're in year 11 and 12, you'll all do very well. Okay, so the vocational courses at school are probably geared to those young men who would like to look at a career pathway straight away. So they're not probably going to look at university directly out of school, they're going to look at a trade or a TAFE course. I will add, you can do a trade or a TAFE course and still go to university later on. So you need to know that because those courses become your ATAR. So nothing is denied to anybody, it's just a different entry level. So we have 4 of those courses here at the college, and we are thinking of adding a 5th one, which I'll talk to people about if you're more interested in. It's called Work Studies. It is virtually what it says. It's a day of work out onto a variety of careers, and then there's obviously some formal training that comes back here at school. But the courses we have at the moment that we run are construction, which obviously directly leads into the building trade, metal and engineering, which leads you to a Certificate 1 in engineering, primary industries, which gives you a Certificate 2 in agriculture, and information, digital, media and technology, which is into the IT area, and it gives you a statement of attainment. What it allows you to do, gentlemen, is to get your HSC, but also get a dual accreditation with industry. So industry recognises those qualifications. And if you go to TAFE after to pick up an apprenticeship, you'll get credit for what you've already started to do. Each of those courses, you need to know, has a 35-hour work placement component. So that's a week that you have to go out. And that comes into a little bit of consideration if you're looking at perhaps doing 2 of those subjects. So for example, if you did primary industries and you did construction, you would be out for 2 weeks during year 11. And then the same thing has to happen into year 12. Sometimes, because that is a fair bit of time out, we are able to work around students going out 1 week of those extra holiday times that we tend to have here at school. So the first week of term, after the end of the term 2 holidays, a lot of the boys went out. I can talk you through those things, but just so that you know, that is a component of it. Those places are set for us through Macarthur Workplace Learning. We don't choose them, and so therefore we have to honour what they send us. So when they send these, they'll give you a lot of choices, but that they were the ones who organised it because they have to be industry specific. Okay, Ms Higgin very quickly said 1 vet subject you can use for your ATAR, so that's fine. And you do have to do the exam component. So if you decide to do construction, you will sit for the construction exam if you want to do vet. Sorry, if you want to use it for your ATAR. Another option that a lot of boys have taken, particularly in the last couple of years, is to attend TAFE. Now the TAFE colleges offer courses that we can't offer here. So anything that was offered at TAFE, and one of those would be construction, you wouldn't do because you're doing it here at school. But if you decided to do construction here at school and you'd like to do plumbing, then that's where you would come through under a TAFE course. Again, they're worth 2 units of your final 13 units. However, you can't use them for your ATAR. So they're all non-ATAR subjects. The TAFE component, the TAFE courses also have a work experience component, so you need to understand that. So you'll have another week. So again, if you did one here, if you did construction and you decided to do automotive at TAFE, then again you'll be out for 2 weeks in year 11 and or the same in year 12. There's a wide range of courses available at TAFE. Our boys this year are involved in automotive, plumbing, animal studies, computer-aided drafting, electro-technology, and that's only just the tip of the iceberg. As of next Monday, the TAFE book is out, and boys, you can come and borrow them from me, talk to me about them, and then we can go through the process. During those interviews that Mrs. Keegan has mentioned, we'll have an expression of interest form that you will fill out, and that requires a parent's signature. The courses are generally not set and confirmed till the beginning of the next year. So we won't know who's been accepted into a TAFE course until the beginning of 2018. So at this stage, everybody would choose 13 units, and if you get into a TAFE course, you will drop one of those subjects. There's a charge for all these courses, and they are written out in your handbook to have a look at. ballpark figure, somewhere between $1,500 and $3,000 seems to be the costs. The college at this stage are able to offer 50% of that cost that we will pick up, and the parents will pick up the other. There's also there has to be, unfortunately, a transport cost. At this stage we're looking at, overseeing it, but at this stage, because we are taking boys, the TAFEs have changed a little bit. A lot of the courses used to be offered at the local TAFE down here at Campbelltown. That's not necessarily the way now. For example, if you wanted to do plumbing, you can only go to Miller College. So we're having to transport boys to the courses, and so therefore there will be at some stage a transport cost involved. All courses go from 1:30 to 5 o'clock, 1:30 to 5:30, or 2 o'clock till 6 o'clock. So it's the responsibility of the boys then to get themselves home. They generally are after school, so those days are usually Monday, Tuesday, but again that could change. So I know it sounds very ambiguous, but we just don't know some of those answers until later on in the year. So that's why the expression of interest form will just be a beginning start for all of you. Something I have to mention are school-based apprenticeships and school-based traineeships. These are probably for the minority of you that are interested in it. It is a great way for the boys, and we've been very successful. I'd say we've got a 99% success rate with our boys who do a school-based apprenticeship. What it means is they come to school for 3 days a week, they go to TAFE 1 day a week, and they go to work placement 1 day a week, and that's in Year 11. For Year 12, the TAFE component falls off, so you're at school 4 days a week and 1 day at TAFE, 1 day at work placement. At the end of Year 12, you get your HSC, but you also get the first year of your apprenticeship fully signed off, so you are ready to go into second year as an apprentice. It's not for everybody, because the work that you miss here at school still has to be obviously accounted for, and the responsibility is very much on you to find that out. Because you do the off the premises work, you will get a study period as part of your timetable, and the boys who are organised and have good time management skills, and I'm happy to assist them with that, usually use that time, and so it's not a great problem. But it's an excellent way to pick up an apprenticeship. The only problem with it is that you have to find your own firm to sponsor you. Now, TAFE are very good at trying to help us, and we have a good name, so we often get people ringing and offering it, but there is that onus in finding your own firm to sponsor you. Very quickly, because I am running out of time, work experience has been mentioned. We're one of the few schools that still does work experience. We do it because we believe, gentlemen, that it gives you such a good experience about the world of work. We had a boy who wanted to be a plumber last year and had gone through everything, and then went crawling under got sent into a block of units right at the end and ended up being claustrophobic. Didn't understand, never occurred to him, and never occurred to anybody else. But sadly, it just wasn't something he could do. So work experience showed him that that wasn't going to be for him, and we were able to change his trade around into something that was more outdoors. But it is a good experience. I know many of you have got that organised. The paperwork for it is due on Friday week. I know some of you are faltering with it, not sure of what you want to do. That's where you need to come and talk to me and to go through that. Boys who are thinking of maybe leaving at the end of the year, again, I'd strongly discourage it, because usually everything that's been said tonight is right. An employer wants someone who's a bit more mature. Usually an employer wants someone who's got a driving licence, and that's almost a game changer. And you're also going to compete against every Year 12 boy who spent 2 years doing a vocational course in construction. However, there are some who are able to pick up an apprenticeship. And if you want to do extra work experience, or you want to have a chance to do a couple of things, then again, that's possible if you come and see me and we talk about it. Someone tonight briefly mentioned about getting into the Defence Force, but of course they pick their own dates. Now, we're happy to accommodate you at a second work experience, but everyone must be out at school at the same time at the end of the year, so just so that you understand that. Finally, my last, white card training. If you're going to be doing a trade for work experience, you need a white card. We've already done 2 classes through, and disappointingly, I had less numbers than I needed for the second class, which was a shame because we have to pay a set amount. So I can only run 2 more courses. That's 40 students I can take through. So if you haven't seen me, or if you haven't seen Mr. Cerrone to get your name down for one of those, then you need to do that very quickly. And finally, next Wednesday, so a week from tonight, in your to-dates thing, we have the Careers Forum here. We are very lucky because most schools don't do a Careers Forum. Same reason, they take you out to the big ones. But we have got the people from the universities coming, the TAFE are coming, the Defence Force, the police, MacArthur, My Gateway, which is one of the big employment agencies from around here. So those people are coming. Parents, you are more than welcome, and in fact I encourage you to come because the people like the fact that you are there supporting your sons and answering the questions that you need to have done. So that's on straight after school at 3, from 3 o'clock till 4 o'clock next week. And then after that, on that day, Mrs. Keegan also will be talking about the ATAR and some of the new changes into the University Admission Board. So a lot of information, and I'm sorry I spoke too quick, but I'm picking up some vibes. And so I'm just going to go straight ahead and introduce Mr. Spencer because he's coming to talk about boarding. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Dean. Very, very brief. Just one slide I want to share with you tonight. It's the journey of one boy who's currently in Year 12. He had some issues in Year 11 and he wasn't a problem student. There was just the fact that he ended up failing 5 of his 6 exams at the end of his preliminary exams. That was the first real warning sign that there was a problem. Mr. Miller picked that up in his analysis that he does of every boy's report. We're also picking that up in boarding now as well in what we're doing with tracking the boys' results. So if I show you the students' results, you'll see there the red is the problem areas. The first row there is his exam results. The third row in was his cumulative assessment marks. And the 5th row in is his ranking in those subjects. We sat down with him. We went through what was some of the issues, how he was studying. We checked his diary every day. We went through his subject books, checked what he was actually doing in study each night. Because he was studying, it's just that what he was doing wasn't effective. We rearranged his pattern of study. As you'll see there, he dropped from studies of religion down to Catholic studies. That made a big difference for him and able to focus on his other subjects, particularly his English and maths, which is the ones we really needed to turn around. And you'll see there that we did. His results in the green, we got him passing. So from failing 5 out of 6 subjects to passing all 6 really was an extraordinary journey for him. And that's still continuing. And his latest result he got in his business studies assessment was 89%. So it's just it's one student, but I'd be happy to say that 15 of our current Year 12 cohort of boarders, of 40 boarders, 15 of them are weekly boarders. And on going through all their reports, I was very pleased tonight to be able to say that every one of them has improvement across not just one subject, but in some cases all their subjects. So boarding works. If you're sitting there tonight hearing all this thinking, I could use the help, I could use the environment. There's 32 boys currently in Year 10 in boarding. That camaraderie goes a long way. Just for surviving the journey of Year 11 and 12, having that mateship goes a long way in helping you improve in your studies as well. Plus we have the tutoring available to you and the supportive environment that's over there. So please, if you're considering it or thinking about it at all, please see me tonight or contact Mrs. Stott and we'll be able to arrange a tour for you at any time you like and have a look at your options. Thank you.
Don't be long.
I've already told not to be long. We do our best to get through in an hour, as you know, but it's very difficult with some people who have so much to tell you about. But anyway, can I say thank you to our presenters tonight. Thank you also to all the staff who are here, Mr Bissett up there running our technology for us, but also to all the KLA coordinators who are down the back. And down the back we have Mr O'Flynn with the TAS department, we've got the HISI department with Mrs Martin and Mrs Murdoch, we've got the science department with Mr Dinnan and Ms Parsons, and we've got Mrs Gardner, as you know, with the English department. We've got Mrs Perrence down there with the art department. We've got Mr Bingham with PE, Mrs Giles with maths, Mrs Clark with RE, and Mrs Curry with computing studies. And we've got Mr. Harrington down there, Mr. Harrison down there with all the ribbons. I'm not sure what the significance of the bottle of wine is, but I'm sure he'll be able to tell you about that. But I want to thank them all for coming out tonight as well. And with that, I'll say good night. They're all yours. Thank you very much.